Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the November webinar. It's a really exciting lineup. I'm just excited because it has all to do with water. And in this heat, all I can think about is getting into cool water. So thank goodness all of our subjects involve some water. I think Cape Town in particular for the rest of the country is windy and hot. And it's just really been a tough 2 weeks. I'm wondering if any of you want to share where you're from. If you'd also like to share what your climate has been like in the last month, because Cape Town skipped the rest of spring and sprung straight into summer heat. So today we're going to be speaking about river ecosystems, particularly because while Martina is more the conservation side of things, I'm the more horticultural side of things. I asked the presenters to collectively talk about garden ponds, garden water systems, general water ecosystems, and I'm quite excited about the Lisbeck Riverine project and the rehabilitation of the Lisbeck River, because if you have a natural river system near you, you might want to look beyond your garden system or your garden space and into your natural systems near you. And you might have always wondered, well, how do I make a difference there? Where does one even begin? And Jessleena will hopefully be able to give you a roadmap of how the Lisbeck River has gotten with success. Ashraf is speaking about shrimp. Michael is speaking about dragonflies. And Jeanne has a pre-recorded, she is out of the country, far away, but managed to pre-record a session for us, and she will be speaking about frogs. Phil will be discussing water ecosystems overall, and as you can hear, it's just a fabulous lineup. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Michael, if you would turn on your video and your mic, I'm going to introduce you to Michael Samways. There he is.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. Welcome. Michael, his title of his talk is Encouraging Dragonflies into Garden Ponds. He has a PhD from London University and is an Emirates Distinguished Professor at Stellenbosch University. He focuses on many aspects of insect conservation, from philosophy through to strategy implementation, nationally and internationally. Michael is a recipient of the John Herschel Medal of the Royal Society of South Africa, Senior Captain Scott and gold medals of the South African Academy of Science and Arts, a gold medal of the Academy of Science of South Africa, and he's received the Lifetime Stellenbosch University Chancellor's Award, which is the IUCN and CCS's Chair Citation of Excellence, the Marsh Award from the Royal Entomological Society. Excuse my, it's been a long day. For outstanding and exemplary lifetime contribution in insect conservation. He is an honorary member of the Entomological Society of South Africa, a Google Scholar. Wow. Citations over 28,000. He has books. He is a rock star. I'm going to end with that. Michael, thank you. Wow. Over to you. Let's hear what you have to say about dragonflies and what we can do to support their well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherise.
Michael, so the green button at the bottom, you can just click on
that. Can you see it your side?
No, not yet. So just go to the green button and then
in the Zoom.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you struggle, I can share from my side, not a problem.
Share.
Yeah, the share button. Yes, coming, yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to start with your video. I think you accidentally put it off if you see my prompt there, but otherwise you can continue. We see your PowerPoint.
Start my video.
Yes.
Okay. Is that all ready to go?
All ready to go. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really great to share ideas from different disciplines. And I saw it was about rivers, and I thought, well, actually, ponds are simply rivers that have come to a stop. Now, I'm going to be talking about dragonflies and how they are attracted to various water systems with a focus on ponds. Now, just a very, very brief introduction. The dragonflies, both the nymphs, the young growing stage, and the adults, are all predaceous. But the nymph is rather like a leopard, it ambushes its prey, whereas the adult is more like a cheetah, it chases its prey. Oh, I can't, page down. I can't get the slide to move.
Just try that, there's a little, like an arrow on the bottom. Yes, V, just V.
This one.
Yeah, you can try that.
Yes. Okay, so dragonflies and damsel odonata. I just mentioned this, they're kind of their space. Usage is very different. The dragonflies, the largest, of course, which are huge. And then there's the tiny dragonflies, and we've got some very tiny ones in South Africa, which live in a very small space. But we know they move around a lot because they're readily colonized new ponds. So it's never been proved how they do it, but they must fly out of the boundary layer and drift along like tiny parasitoids or aphids and be attracted to the polarized light and then drop down to a new site. Now, just a quick background, the species richness of the odonata, highest in the Congo, not wildly high in South Africa, but the point is, have a look at the endemism. There's a big chunk of endemism right across here. And Angola's just recently been explored, and that's also a very exciting place. Now, I just mentioned this is very similar to plants. It's the high endemism and the high richness up in the northeast there is because of no glaciations for a long time, the warm and the cold currents, and the mountain ranges. Obviously, there are thermal aspects as well that contribute to South Africa's biodiversity. Dragonflies are very variable in their traits, although their actual form is fairly standardized, but they're very responsive to environmental change. So they've been used quite a lot as sentinels of freshwater conservation. There are various types of stressors, from sediment and heavy metals, algal blooms, most of it because of landscape transformation. And the stresses are both in the water and on the land. And the stresses are often synergistic. That by far the most damaging aspect to dragonflies in South Africa, invasive alien trees. This is part of the Witrivier and Bainskloof. Hasn't been cleared. You can see the river is totally obliterated by the trees, and it just pushes out the endemic species completely. The good news is, and thanks to the Working for Water program, when these aliens are removed, the dragonfly recovery is remarkable. We just have these pictures here actually on top of Table Mountain, which was previously had pines on the top, of course. But when they were cleared, you can see the dragonfly Bartic index went from 10 to 60. I won't go into details of the index, but it's based on 3 things: habitat speciality, IUCN status, and the distribution. And the dragonfly recovery score is 600% on Table Mountain, which is really quite extraordinary. Sorry, let me just go back a bit quickly. The situation in the for example, in Limpopo in the savannah, is not so high. This is not because the recovery is not good, but they're mostly widespread species, so they don't have such a high score. Now, the point is many species occupy artificial habitats, and particularly still water habitats, but particularly those that are good quality, that are rich in vegetation, both in the water and around the edge. So the terrestrial matrix is as important as the river, particularly the immediate riparian zone. But in some cases, even the distal matrix, if it's transformed, can also affect them. Now, inflow and outflow are important. Now, this is one of the trout dams in the KZN Midlands, and these inflows and outflows keep the water very fresh. And this particular dragonfly, the sapphire blue, is very common in these lakes, and yet ironically, it's quite rare in the wild. So they're really making a huge contribution to its conservation. Now, the botanical gardens, now we start scaling down to smaller areas. These botanical gardens can be really important as alternative habitats in times of droughts. And we've got two endemic species here, the white malachite and the elatinur, and the sooty threadtail at Harold Porter. And these artificial habitats play a very important role in maintaining them throughout that terrible drought we had about 4 or 5 years ago. At Peter Maritzburg, he developed a dragonfly trail, and sorry, I'm pressing the wrong buttons here. And it's based on this area here, a small impoundment in the local river, which increased the number of species enormously. Some of the riverine species were pushed to either side of the pond, but this dragonfly trail was developed here. And it's been very, very popular actually amongst gardeners and visitors. And Chris Willis and I did a Dragonfly and Damselford Trail guide for KZN National Botanical Garden, but also did Water Dancers. We call it Water Dancers. That's a translation of Zulu, Jigamanzi, of South African gardens. Now, building your own pond, one of the important, this is a still from a video, that's right, it's a bit fuzzy, but is to put in a plastic sheet and then line it with rubble, obviously, that's not going to penetrate, but leave an area in the middle for silt to accumulate. 1 year later, this is what the same pond looked like. Notice there's an inflow and there's an outflow. So aeration is really important, and having these various depths in the pond play a very important role. And this is that same pond today. And so far, 18 species of dragonfly have been recorded. This pond is locally here in Somerset West. And you can see how the vegetation's grown up, the pond has settled, the macrophytes are there. So it can be very, very attractive to dragonflies, and this really helps improve their area of occupancy. And then this is a hot tub with 0 dragonflies, and this featured in Home and Garden last year on how to develop an eco pond. And a year afterwards, you can see the same infrastructures used, the same filter, the same pump, but now there are 2 fountains instead of the pumps around the edge, which were blocked off, and plenty of oxygen in the water. The ammonia level stays fairly constant, and within a year, this jacuzzi was beginning to establish. We painted black instead of that horrible dull pink that they normally are. And this is the pond as it was last year, as it's matured, and the irises have been really fantastic. And 3 species, I mean, that's not particularly high, but it is a tiny little pond. And actually the stream hawker is a South African endemic. So you can really do something, even with a tiny, tiny pond in a restricted space. And I just included a 4th species there, the bronze beauty, as just by way of decoration. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I was giggling before I switched my mic back on with a bronze beauty. I'm like, let's do it any way we can. Gosh, what beautiful names for dragonflies, river whiskey
Yes.
water dancers.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I might not have paid attention properly, but how many species of dragonfly do we have in South Africa?
About 168. There's still the possibility of occasional visitor might come down from the northeast. There's still a possibility we might find some new endemics, because in the last two decades, we've discovered 2 new endemics here in the Cape. Big species in Cinco Julia. We've done the DNA, and they're incredibly ancient. They go back 55 million years. It's extraordinary how ancient some of our endemics are.
That's absolutely incredible. I thought the white malachite was beautiful. I had no idea that
Yes,
a dragonfly
yes.
looked like that.
Yeah.
Stunning to inspire us with it. And I feel like you heard my plea about the heat. A hot tub turned into a cool eco pool. What a dream. So inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets appreciated much more, that's for sure. And everybody loves it. You know,
It's
if you've got a hot tub, I mean, it's a 5-minute wonder, right? And
right.
and you can still, you know, have your glass of wine and sit round it and appreciate it.
It sounds amazing. Luckily, I don't know that person, so I won't visit, but I'll try to create one of my own. Thank you so much, Michael. That was
Well,
wonderful.
thank you, Cherise. Thank you.
And then Phil, it's over to you. If you'll turn on your mic and your video.
Yes, there we go.
So welcome, Phil.
Thank you
And
very much.
To introduce Phil, his topic is going to be an introduction to the Provincial Riparian Rehabilitation Program. Phil is a botanist who specializes in invasive alien plants, both in their identification and removal strategies. He's worked previously for the City of Cape Town and Sandby before taking up a role with the Provincial Environmental Law Enforcement Branch of the Green Scorpions. At the end of that contract role, he moved within the department and took on a more water-focused role with the Directorate of Pollution and Chemicals Management. This role focuses on securing the long-term water resilience for the province, and it's by rolling out of a range of nature-based water filtration solutions combined with a world-leading riparian rehabilitation program following the clearing of the alien species in the riparian zones. And this role, sorry, I'm just catching up with my notes. I have to read the end of Phil's introduction. And the clearing of invasive species in the riparian zone has been shown to be the best place to focus clearing efforts on. So in his spare time, Phil is an avid gardener. He focuses on urban food production and value-added products. He is a beekeeper, a ham radio and emergency communications operator, and he volunteers for the Friends of the Lisbeck and Sandparks Honorary Rangers program. But most importantly, he needs to mention that he is an underpaid Uber driver and an ATM machine for two teenage kids. I feel that pain. Right. Beautiful introduction, Phil. Love the humor. And over to you. Let's see what you have to say. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction and for having me on this platform. I'm very excited to be here and to share with you what the province has done in this riparian rehabilitation space. So I'm going to be taking what Michael has said of and extrapolating just a tad from the green jacuzzi to a province-wide program, focusing on the strategic rivers in our province, which are mainly the Berg and the Breda. And to run through our provincial plan for riparian rehabilitation. And I think, as was mentioned in my intro, which ended up sounding embarrassing like a job interview CV, we are focused on clearing invasive alien trees. I think most people on this platform will know the background to invasive alien trees and some of their problems. We all know, for instance, after day zero, particularly that invasive alien trees in our catchments are stealing a lot of our water, about 3 months supply or the Voelvlei Dam equivalent on an annual basis. So the clearing of invasive alien trees just for our water balance is of significant importance for us as a province. We are also aware of other impacts of invasive alien trees, particularly in the riparian zone, one of which is that the trees themselves force the current of the river into the middle of the stream, which tends to kind of channelize the river and causes excessive erosion in a downward path, which, if left unchecked, can erode the river so deep, in fact, that in the summertime, in the dry periods, instead of the river water being an expression of groundwater, it is actually draining the groundwater. Also, these invasive alien trees leave some legacy effects, which I'll get to later. This particular study done through Alana Rebello and others looked at the socio-economic benefits of investing in ecological infrastructure. And one of their key takeaways was when they modeled whether clearing should be taking place in the upper catchments in the mountainous areas or on the rivers, they found that there was a doubling of return on investment for clearing alien trees in rivers, particularly those rivers that feed into strategic impoundments. In other words, that's where the invasions are stealing the most water. It's not to say that we shouldn't be clearing in upper catchments, just that rivers are very important aspects of clearing. But according to national standards and the way of operating, this is a successfully cleared riparian area in the sense that the alien trees are no longer there. You can see that they've been cut down and that they're no longer expressing above ground biomass. But anyone with even an inkling of ecological sensitivity, never mind training, will know that this looks like an absolute disaster, and it is. The first most obvious thing is this is clearly an erosion risk, and you can see here there are trees sitting in the main stem there of the river. Those were on the bank when they were cleared. So the clearing without any rehabilitation has led to at least a 4-something meter horizontal erosion and at least 2 meters vertical erosion. Of course, that eroded soil has to go somewhere too. So there's an impact not only on this particular space, but wherever that water slows down, whether it's a farmer's sump for removing water to irrigate his fields or a strategic impoundment like a dam, those things are getting silted up. In this particular case, this is the Berg River that flows to the Berg River estuary, which is an immensely important estuary, not only for fisheries, but for the economics of the entire province. Our department did a study on the economic evaluation of that estuary a couple of years ago now, with probably outdated numbers, but it looks like that estuary provides something like 400 million rands worth into the local economy on an annual basis. Now, if this kind of silt causes damage to that estuary, you can imagine what the knock-on impacts are for the regional economy, not to mention the fishery. You will also appreciate that if you know anything about fynbos and the botany, that fynbos really doesn't like to be disturbed, have its roots disturbed in any way. And so this kind of clearing is not the kind of disturbance that encourages fynbos to recover in this space. You know what loves this kind of disturbance? Invasive species. So what has happened in this and the previous slides clearing methodology is a clearing of the slate and an open invitation for invasive aliens to re-inhabit the space. Of course, there are legacy effects that I mentioned earlier. Australian acacias absorb nitrogen out of the air and they nitrify the soil. So you can get what's called secondary invaders coming back in the spot, and grasses are a particularly bad kind of secondary invader because unlike single-stemmed trees, they're much harder to clear if they take root in a particular location. So we've got some challenges to overcome with this kind of clearing methodology and its consequences. So what we've done as a province is we've invested in active rehabilitation. That is, we have contracts that run with service providers that gather plants, specifically indigenous and endemic riparian specific plants from the catchment with which where we're going to do the restoration. So normally from a site nearby. Now remember that you'll see then, so those previous photos, that some of those areas that are cleared of their riparian alien trees are then again surrounded by agriculture or urban areas. So I don't know how anyone imagines that a local endemic appropriate riverine or wetland species seed is somehow going to find its way magically to this newly disturbed patch. So we become those agents of dispersal, and we source plants from as close as possible to the rehab site. We grow them up in nurseries until they are rugged enough to survive planting out. And then we take them to some of our disturbed and impacted areas and plant these in situ. This was one in particular that was quite an interesting one. We had cleared the acacias here. You can see some of the still standing population on the left of this photo. So we knew grasses were going to be a very strong contender as a secondary invader. And grasses can swamp the little plants. Even though we've grown them up, they are still quite vulnerable for at least a year or two of planting out. What we experimented on in this particular patch was we dug these pits that you'll see marked with the little stockies all around. Those pits then had 5 or 6 species, different species planted in them, from what you might call climax tree species to more sort of pioneer herbaceous species that would act as an understory or a nurse plant for the developing tree. And in that way, that little pit would outcompete the grass, and we hoped that those pits, as it were, would nucleate towards each other. And here's a photo from a year later where you can see the emergent pits, the species from those pits are growing up and out. You can see the grass that would have outcompeted them had they been planted alone in the ground, but now they are starting to shade out the grass. From the opposite angle, again, you can see about a year in where the plants are starting to emerge from their pits with some of the more shrub component taking over. And a year after that, you can see some of the more tree species now taking over from that shrub component and bursting through. And the grass is still there, but it's suffering in the shade that's being created by these trees. There again, 3 years later, and you'll see a very nicely rehabilitated patch on the left-hand side of that fence, whereas the grazed lawn that is developing on the right-hand side of the fence is obviously species depauperate and not really the kind of riparian habitat that you'd expect in the Cape. For another excellent example, we have this facility in Franschhoek called the Water Hub, where we've repurposed an abandoned wastewater treatment works, and we have used the drying beds and repurposed them as nature-based solutions or constructed wetlands to filter highly polluted effluent water coming down from the informal Langrug settlement above the site. And we use this as a trial and demonstration for these kind of nature-based solutions to filter water. But that's kind of an aside for this talk, which is more on the riparian rehab. So this is the kind of river situation coming down from the informal settlement with lots of litter and lots of nutrients. So the grasses and trees are growing vigorously in this patch. Here you'll notice the Kikuyu grass in the foreground is doing what I was describing of trees earlier. It's channelizing the water by its thick matted growth. And you'll see what should have been a more braided open river pathway being this narrow incised channel down the middle of the screen. So this is clearly not a healthy patch, although from the look of it, the lushness of the greenness looks very healthy, but there's not an indigenous species in sight in this photo. So this one we treated slightly differently. We mowed fire breaks and cut the lawn. We let it dry down in summer, and then we set it on fire. Those of you who know anything about fynbos know that this is the kind of trigger that fynbos likes. Although getting a burn permit in an urban area in summer was quite a challenge, I'll be honest. But I think it did the job. So as Phoenix rises from the ashes, we then planted these little new indigenous riparian species along dripper lines, so that each one would be individually drippered, and the surrounding dry area throughout the summer would remain desiccated, and probably and hopefully even after the fire keep the propagation of weeds and other species low. So here we are in the riparian channel, and you'll see the dripper lines with the plants growing on them. That was at the start of the project in early 2023, and this was a couple of months ago. Phenomenal growth, and you will see a little bit of the grass trying to come back in the understory, but in the main, the endemic species have totally taken over this patch and converted this highly polluted, effluent and litter-strewn body of water into a biodiverse paradise. Here again, that photo from earlier, then after the fire and the grass is removed with the dripper lines laid out, and then again now a couple of months ago with all the indigenous species putting their head up and basically suppressing the undergrowth of invasive grass. Again, from that same bridge looking upstream with the fire on its way, after the fire with the dripper lines, and a couple of months ago, you can barely see the gabion wall behind. That gabion wall that's so obvious in this photo almost disappeared now behind the plants, and this is within 3 years of initial planting. So we're very excited about the recovery on this site. We did this mainly for a recovery after invasive alien species, but there was an ancillary benefit that I guess we should have seen coming. If you think about it, and you think about the natural systems of rivers in the Western Cape, this was kind of obvious, but we needed those flash floods that came with the cut-off lows in 2023 to really bring it home what the advantage was. So here is a patch along the Breede River now, where we had rehabilitated a berm, which is an artificial structure, basically trying to keep the river in its channel, quote unquote, because our rivers are supposed to spread wide in the wintertime and at high flow. They're supposed to spread out laterally, but that would impact farms. So they have generated this sort of berm or dam wall along there to keep the river on the far side of that berm. But our rehabilitation only came to a point, you'll see about halfway along that berm. And when the floods came down, this berm where we had planted remained intact. Now this is looking from the other side, but you will see where that heap of cobbles is, that was the unrehabilitated patch that burst through. And that water came right through. Our rehabilitated berm stayed intact, but that vineyard was completely flooded. So this option of berming the river to keep it in place and chain it in place backfired spectacularly, and the berm ended up being the dam that kept the flood water in the vineyard instead of returning to the stream. So kind of a lesson there. But when we looked elsewhere, we saw so much evidence. Here's another one. You'll see someone walking there through the rehabilitation patch, and you'll see the flotsam from this flood almost at head height for a person standing there, but actually no real damage to the rehab section. Plants are knocked over, some of the trees are a bit flattened, but in general, it's captured the flotsam and it hasn't collapsed and it hasn't eroded. Again, a little less obvious, but there's flotsam there again at about head height, but the bushes remain intact and everything looks in place. Contrast that to the same place. I've now turned on my heels and I'm looking across that same river channel to the opposite bank, where you can see those poplars are almost bare rooted now. The erosion on the opposite bank was so severe that these trees are in their last throes of life as their entire 2 meter odd bank that they were stabilized in has gone, and the cobbles exposed from previous floods. Likewise, just downstream of that rehabilitation patch, the sedimentation from upstream erosion is just dumped, smothering whatever was trying to take a foothold here. Another example, if you needed one, this is from a place called the 24 Rivieren, where the river used to be 24 rivers, hence the name. It was a braided channel of multiple streams that were over years successively hemmed in with these berms into a single channel. But rivers don't like to be told what to do. So when the floods came down, the river found its original channels, and those had all been planted with orchards, and many hectares of orchards were lost. And an orchard of citrus costs at least R1 million to establish, and that's before it starts producing fruit. So there's tens of millions of rands damage in this photo alone, and this was a microcosm of this entire catchment's damages. So this is a weird sequence of before and after photos. This, believe it or not, is the before photo, as it were, during the flood, from a bridge over the Breda River. This photo is of the same bridge location after the flood. And you will see that the natural, mostly there's an oak tree in the middle of the foreground of this photo, but mostly indigenous bank has survived this flood and this absolute torrent of water with very little real impact compared to what you will have seen in the previous photos. Again, there's at the high flow with clearly a lot of energy in that water, and this is what it produced. Some of the cobbles were moved along the bank and the stream bed, but by and large, the stream has survived and there's not real damage on the banks. Again, this was one of our oldest sites that needs to be updated. This bank disturbance is now sitting at about 11 or 12 years old. There was unlawful clearing done on both sides of this bank by two different landowners. The landowner on the left approached our province, and we initiated an active rehabilitation project on his bank, and the right-hand side bank was left to natural succession, if you want to call it that, passive restoration. And you'll see that there are very few different species, mostly grassy, reedy type species on the passive restoration. And in fact, there's still deposition and erosion happening on that bank, even though it is on the inside curve of the river, the less energetic curve, whereas the curve on the high energy outside curve of the river that we rehabilitated is actually a complex of multiple species. And this, when we were taking this photo with this farmer, it was an incredible case of this shifting baselines that we undergo, because he had grown up as a kid on what was his grandfather's farm. And he remembered only after it came back that there were kingfishers on this bank of the river. So he'd forgotten that the kingfishers had long since disappeared from the stretch of the river because of the change in riparian vegetation with the alien species. And only after their removal and this reintroduction of this multi-species complex did he remember in retrospect that they had been gone. So there's a lot of stories like this of rehab bringing back things that people hadn't realized had disappeared from that landscape. Just lastly then, as a quick numbers, we've restored so far 32 degraded riparian sites over the last 10 years of this program. The numbers are quite small in terms of rehabilitated area, but I think the linear stretch of river so far is just over 1 kilometer. We've generated quite a lot in terms of employment, nearly 21,000 person days. We've planted a lot of plants, and this is slightly updated now. That number is very close to 1 million plants, from now upwards of 80 different species that are planted in various sites along the Berg and Breda rivers and some of their tributaries. My real goal, if I can add this in at the death of my presentation, is to really try and extrapolate this program and pair it with our national department's riparian clearing through the Working for Water program, if they can reestablish that program, which hasn't been functioning very well over the last couple of years. But we really need to start moving away from this idea of restoring degraded sites and restoring entire rivers and entire river stretches, because that's the only way it's going to make material impact, as you saw on that farm where we only rehabilitated part of the berm. The other part failed because its ecological infrastructure wasn't intact. So we need a way of taking large stretches of river and strategically rehabilitating both banks for a long period to affect the kind of lasting changes we need in this environment. And look at that, I'm 20 seconds short of 20 minutes that I was promised. Thank you.
That was really impressive.
I hope
Well
I didn't talk too fast.
The timing was fabulous. No, the talking was absolutely fine. The pace was manageable. Thank you, Phil. I just wanted to say that I thought your phrase in the beginning of riverbeds expressing what should be expressing water, actually draining water, was quite emotive and a beautiful way of putting it. And that your succession planting is a beautiful description of how one needs to layer to get a stable planting. And a lot of people start with pioneers or they start with the final and they seldom combine the two. So that was really inspirational as well. And just from a personal note, I'd like to say that in all my many years of growing plants and using indigenous plants, I have a particular love for wetland and riparian species, if they are endemic or naturalized or natural to the Western Cape, because they are beautifully adapted to summer drought and winter drowning. They are the toughest plants I know. So kudos to them. And thank you, Phil, very much. I'm looking forward to seeing the next project that you're involved in with Jessleena sharing about the Lisbeck. Thank you. It was
Thanks.
great.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jessleena, if you'll switch on your
Oh.
mic. There we go. So
Yes.
Jessleena is the project coordinator from the Friends of the Lisbeck and a PhD candidate at the University of Cape Town. Originally, she's from India, but she's been based in Cape Town since 2010. And rehabilitation and stewardship on the Lisbeck River is what she is going to be speaking about. Jessleena is an urban ecologist, and her research is focused primarily on the ways of using birds as indicators of urban ecosystem health. Jessleena is passionate about the restoration and connectivity of neglected urban green spaces, and she feels strongly that the solution to many of the world's problems lies in bringing awareness of nature back into people's everyday lives. Beautifully, beautifully put. And I love the ending. The Lisbeck River has been a steady source of inspiration throughout Jess's career and remains one of her greatest teachers. Well, on that, over to you, Jessleena.
Thank you, Cherise. Can everyone hear me properly? Good. Yeah,
Yes,
thanks so
we
much
can
for
hear
that
you.
introduction. Thank you. Yeah, so as Cherise said, I'll be speaking about the Lisbeck River. This is a role that I've only been in for about 1.5 years now. And again, I just want to express gratitude for the kind of variation of talks in this webinar. I think it's such a perfect kind of synergistic combination. And Phil is somebody who I have leaned on heavily for advice as I've gone into this role. Cherise has already shared my introduction, but what I will say, yeah, I've been a student at UCT for a very long time, mostly working on birds, but very recently I've kind of started recovering from plant blindness at a rapid rate, thanks to this job and thanks to people like Phil and Cherise and so many other people associated with BOTSOC who have been really, really amazing in sharing advice on rehabilitation and what Cherise was speaking about just now about these wetland species, which I've also developed quite a fondness for. And one thing I just wanted to add is that my research journey at UCT actually began on the Lisbeck as well. My honors thesis back in 2014 was looking at the role of small urban rivers like the Lisbeck in augmenting bird diversity in a city. So it's really cool to be able to kind of come back full circle, but also now be exposed to this much more practical applied approach to urban ecology, which is something that just really, really excites me. So I will be sharing with you a little bit about the projects that we're involved with, but just a little bit of background on the Friends of the Lisbeck. It's an organization that's existed for about 30 years and started off mainly as a group of just concerned residents and community members who were worried about this river that was very neglected, and really just started off by kind of picking up litter and banding together to kind of create awareness around this river. And from there, it has grown rapidly. We are now in a position that we can employ a full-time team to work in the river every day. And we've also been just gaining support along the way and really earning recognition for the work that we do. So it's really, really great to be recognized for that. We just recently got the Mayor's Medal as well, which is just a huge achievement as well, and a really good nod to the work that we do. This is the team that is working on the river currently. Some of them have been with us for almost 13 years and they know the river like the back of their hands, and they're really, really incredible. And this is called the Lisbeck Maintenance Project, the work that they do and the project that I'm mainly running. And most of this work involves aiding clearing along the river, removing litter, monitoring pollution, trail maintenance, and also rehabilitation. In a degraded river like the Lisbeck, we can't really aim for restoration just yet, but that is definitely the long-term goal. But yeah, the project is also a way to provide employment opportunities and also training opportunities. Each year, we also have 4 interns from disadvantaged backgrounds that join our team as well. And we also try to just give them as many training opportunities as possible. So this is kind of the map of the Liesbeek catchment, and it's not a very long river. It's only 9 kilometers, but I just feel, especially from my training as an urban ecologist, that it's just such a perfect melting pot of all the different issues that you have in an urban ecosystem. It's all happening on the Liesbeek, from the social issues as well, straight down to every kind of environmental issue you can think of. Just this week, we had, gosh knows how many pollution incidents. So there's always things happening on the river. And something to kind of note is that I think a lot of people have this perception of the Liesbeek as what you see on this picture on the left, which is fair, rightly so, because a lot of the river is canalized. In a city, Phil explained beautifully that rivers don't like being told what to do. A river will find its way, whichever way it flows. And so you can't have that in the city. So as a result, a lot of our rivers have been kind of constricted and canalized like this. But there are a lot of natural pockets along the river, and that's where we focus most of our work. So I've marked here a few of the sites where we spend a lot of time. But I'll also be speaking to you specifically about 3 projects that we have been spending a lot of time on.
Jessleena, just make sure that your PowerPoint is changing slides, please.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I've been changing over here and not there. Here we go. Sorry. There's our team. And this is here we go. So here's the Liesbeek catchment. So those are the main sites that we've been working along the river. So I'll be just highlighting a few of these projects, which are kind of now our flagship projects. But yeah, as I said, a lot of the work that we do is finding these pockets of natural portions of the river and doing as much as we can by way of rehabilitation and planting indigenous plants as well. So this is one of the sites in Newlands, and this is also one of the sites where we're really supported by the local ward councillor as well. And so this is one site where we've been doing planting, but the ones that I will be focusing on, I'll take you back to my honors project in 2014. And this was a picture that I recently stumbled across, and I was just blown away because I just can't believe how much this has changed in the time since. So this was a photo that was taken in 2014 at one of the sites that I was doing a bird count at the time. But in 2023, this became one of our sort of flagship projects where it has now become a reconstructed wetland. And so, sorry, oh gosh, I'm not changing anything again. Here we go, sorry, here we go. Yeah, so this is what it looked like in 2014. And, oh gosh, sorry, here we go. So now it's a wetland, and we basically, with the assistance from the city, we got permission to kind of re-excavate a channel that was initially kind of designed to catch the overflow water when the river is flooding and reconnect the river to its floodplain. Because like Phil said, over here as well, we have a situation where on the right-hand side of this picture, there's this elevated berm that was constructed to, again, constrict the river. But what ends up happening then is that it's completely disconnected from its floodplain. And so this occurrence of flash flood incidents is that much worse. And so we re-excavated that channel, but we also created a few seasonal ponds. And so this is what it looked like in 2023 after the first year. And we did a lot of planting here as well. And whenever we do planting, it's also an opportunity to invite community members to join us. And also an opportunity to kind of strengthen our partnerships. So we often get huge donations of plants from the city. We got about, I think for this project, we got about 700 resios and a whole bunch of other plants as well. And this is closer to what it's looking like now. But as Phil said, this is one site where we're quickly realizing that reinvasion is a huge problem of primarily kikuyu grass in this case. That is pretty much what the site mainly was beforehand. And in year 2 of this site now, we're really facing battles with kikuyu. So we have to be really, really creative about how to kind of defend those edges of the wetland boundary. But nonetheless, we've still had a lot of wildlife returning, and we're still learning a lot about the system. I don't have the time in this presentation to go into all the photos of flooding and everything, but like Phil showed, the amount of debris, because this is obviously now on the lower end of the river in Observatory, the amount of debris that washes down after the first flood of the year is quite extraordinary. So we still need to find ways of kind of buffering the rest of the wetland system from all of that flotsam that comes down. But we're learning as we go and kind of figuring out how does the water flow around these channels, and how can we also make sure that the wetland is acting as a sponge, but also treating the water before it goes back out to the river, which is still a huge problem that we are facing, because this is also an area where in a high flood, you will also get often sewage overflows happening. So these are all these challenges that you only really find out, after a couple of years of the site kind of taking shape. So this is a work in progress. And one of the things we still plan on kind of extending the footprint of this wetland. So the area that you're looking at right now is this little section over here, but there's still a lot that we can do in terms of rehabilitating other sections. So the next phase of this wetland will probably be to look at this side here. Sorry, the green polygon. And yeah, so that's a work in progress. But right now, our main focus is to just stay on top of the reinvasion with kikuyu and several other invasive species as well, and to just make sure that our plants are not getting completely smothered when flooding does happen. The next project that I want to speak about is one that took off this year, although it was in the pipelines for a very long time. We call it our fame-boss snake garden. And the whole idea here initially was to kind of have a snaking path that goes along the river, along the pedestrian path, and have a kind of fame-boss garden that goes along there. But then we realized that there was an opportunity to kind of do more with the site. This is an area, if you're familiar with Cape Town, this is across from the Hartley Vale Sports Stadium. And it is, it's basically just grass, essentially. And there's a few areas where people will kind of, picnic and everything in summer and kind of be underneath the shade of trees and all of that. So we also didn't want to interfere with the utility of the site. But we also saw an opportunity here to kind of work with the stormwater drains that exist over there. So this is, so obviously with all of these things, to remove all of that grass manually is a big job. So we get assistance from the city, and we had a digger come in to scrape the site so that we could achieve that little snake shape. This is what the site looked like before, and this was the stormwater drain that we really wanted to kind of incorporate into the site design. And this is what that looks like now. So we kind of, I wasn't sure if we were actually going to be able to recreate that kind of snake shape, but you can kind of see this is meant to be the head of a puff adder, and it kind of then curves around. And it's still very much, it's very much a work in progress as well. And what we've had to do as well here is have these kind of berms around the site, which are heavily planted with ground cover species like sour fig and Octotus and gazania and things like that, which can kind of serve as this kind of pioneer that keeps the grass at bay and defends our edges of our site, for now at least, we hope. And the real goal here is also to just get people to appreciate what the indigenous biodiversity would look like. So here we've added a lot of kind of common fame-boss species, a lot of pretty flowering things, as well as a lot of medicinal plants. And it's really amazing to see a lot of people walk through this area. It's really, really amazing to see people take notice, and especially in spring, even after 1 year. I mean, these plants were only planted in July, but even after 6 months, it's already looking incredible. So I'm very excited to see how it will look next spring, especially once things are kind of established and flowering again. This is another view of the site. Sorry, I think I put my after image before the before image. Sorry, that's what it looked like before. And that's what it looks like now as well. So here also we really wanted to make sure that it's connected to the river, and that there's kind of that continuity, and that the snake sort of is an extension of the river. It's my other image. Yeah. And then this is also another image from the other side, and this is how it's looking now. We can't do this without the assistance of volunteers from the community. So this was on Mandela Day this year. And it's incredible. Already we have wildlife moving back in. One of the best things to see is all the monkey beetles on all the flowers in spring. And just above, on the lights of the Hartley Vale Stadium, there's a family of peregrine falcons that's kind of always there. So while all of this was happening, we had these birds watching over. It was lovely. And this dickop also moved in. And this is kind of the future plan for this site, is that we still want to make this more of a swale so that we could eventually try and daylight the stormwater pipe and have it function more as a swale, and also to try and have some way of dealing with the stormwater along this pathway and kind of have some swales along the pathway as well, so that we can get rid of some of that hard infrastructure and replace it with plants that would also treat some of this water, which is mainly, it's not actually a lot of water that collects here, but whenever it rains, it does just pool along the pavement and it collects all this horrible oil from the parking lot and everything. So one of the things we want to do is treat the stormwater before it goes, or even capture it so it doesn't even have to immediately just run off into the river. And so that a lot of what we're doing is to kind of put these ideas around the sponge city kind of idea into practice and have ways for water to kind of slow down before it flows straight out. And finally, this is a site that I'm particularly obsessed with because it's just around the corner from where I live in Mowbray. This is in fact just before that wetland, just before the N2. So if the wetland is on the lower side of the N2, this site is just above the N2. And again, it's one of those natural sections of the river where we do have a lot to work with in terms of rehabilitation. So last year I was very excited about this before and after image, because previously it was just a monoculture of that invasive ginger lily. Previously, we'd just been kind of slashing it to prevent it from flowering and proliferating. But last year, we actually decided to start digging it out. As Phil showed in those images, when you do this clearing, obviously you can't just leave it bare like that. A mistake we made last year was that we were a bit too bulb heavy in our planting because that's all we could kind of get our hands on. This year, we've really been focused on filling in those gaps. So on that bank, I'll show you the latest after image just now. But this is also another section of that river where there's a funny little inlet that kind of flows backwards into this little ditch next to this bank. So this is an example, though, where we can do our clearing and hope for the best and hope that we're doing all of this work at the right time of year, except that suddenly then you get an aseasonal flood in April, and we do have those problems with erosion and siltation, all of the things that Phil described. So it's constantly a trial and error and learning what works. This was what it looked like kind of the other bank looked like sort of last year when it was very bulb heavy, but we've slowly started to augment that with more perennial species, and it's looking incredible right now. I'm particularly obsessed with Pelargonium capitatum for this area because it's just the perfect thing that we need for that kind of ground cover. So we're slowly achieving our goals here of greater diversity, but as Phil said, you disturb the soil, and what loves it the most is the invasive. So the site right now, it was looking lovely after we did the weeding, but all of those gaps in between fill up quickly. Even though we just did the weeding this week, by 3 weeks' time, it'll look like we were never there. So this time of year is particularly challenging at this site, but we're slowly getting there. And something we've really been experimenting with this year is kind of this idea, like Phil was saying, if you're going to be doing all of this clearing, you also have to be doing the replanting, but we're a small organization with limited funds, and sourcing as many plants as we need is difficult. So one thing that we have been trying to do is see what we can grow ourselves. And so there's a lot of easy species that we're collecting seed or cuttings from. And we've also been trying to kind of rope in community members to grow these plants for us, because a lot of them are incredibly easy to grow. And so these are kinds of things I thought, let's grow some Isolepis, and I ended up with far more than I knew what to do with, but it's a wonderful plant and great frog habitat. So these are some of the species that we've been working with. And I added this picture in last minute after Michael's talk, because in my effort to try and create a little nursery at home, I tried to make a pond, but it's not much of a pond. It's really just a place for all my plants to sit in water, but we're getting there. And yeah, we're just experimenting also with different things that we can grow that will work on the river. And finally, this is what it's all about, is the wildlife. And so Phil mentioned kingfishers, and we do have kingfishers on the river. Malachi kingfishers are one of the most common, actually. A lot of snakes. Chameleons for me are the most exciting. I feel like whenever I see a chameleon, I know we're doing something right, because that idea of connectivity, for a chameleon to be able to move across, it's not easy. So if chameleons are getting around, I feel like we're doing the right thing. And we see a lot of them, increasingly more. In Mowbray and the OBS site, we've also been seeing evidence of otters. I've not yet seen one myself, but we were for a while seeing a lot of the prints and the droppings, and there's plenty of food for them as well, because we do have a lot of crabs. So this is really exciting, and again, like something people would never think. This photo of the footprints was taken under the N2 bridge, so it's quite incredible to see that these things are around, even in these areas that people perceive as degraded. And yeah, finally, I just wanted to kind of add that the way that we kind of share this message and make sure that people realize the importance of the Liesbeek is by getting them to actually engage with it, so that they feel a sort of sense of investment, and that if they've been to one site before, when they come back the next year, they can see the difference and say, oh, I had a small part in that. So that's really what it's all about. And I think that is all I was going to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Jessleena. That's fabulous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my last message was just to say view your garden as part of a catchment and part of an urban ecosystem, and all the wildlife will return.
Good message, but I think you had us at the chameleons.
Yeah,
All of
exactly.
us long for chameleons and birds. It was absolutely wonderful. I can see your passion and your joy coming through and all the hard work that's gone into it. Thank you so much. Really fabulous. So over to Ashraf. Ashraf and I met about a year ago, and we had an instant connection over shrimp, not the ones you eat, the ones that you keep in your aquatic systems where usually people would keep a goldfish. We just keep shrimp. Ashraf has got his title, which is, sorry, I've lost it, Ashraf, but it's about the giants of the, hold on, let me do this properly, my apologies. Tiny giants and the vital role freshwater shrimp play in our South African water ecosystems. Ashraf likes to keep things simple, and he said all he wants to be known as for his introduction is a permaculturalist, a horticulturalist, a facilitator, and an educator. It's beautiful. That describes you perfectly. Over to you, Ashraf. Let's hear the shrimp story.
Amazing. Good evening, everyone. Am I clear? Amazing. Okay, good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Ashraf Sirkhoth. I'd first like to say thank you to Cherise for inviting me to partake in this webinar. I think it's amazing that I can be part of it, and it's been exceptionally educational thus far. To the previous speakers, you guys have been fabulous. Thank you for your inspirational and highly educational and informative speaks and talks. It was amazing to learn concepts that I never imagined existed. And Jessleena, if you're still online, I'd love to get involved. I'm like 2 kilometers away from the Liesbeek River. I'd love to volunteer some of my time. All right. Without further ado, I encourage you, the listeners, to take this short little journey with me. Okay, I'd like you guys to imagine a creature no bigger than your thumb that quietly keeps entire river systems clean, feeds fish that feeds millions of people, and can tell us within weeks whether a river is dying or thriving. Such a remarkable creature truly exists, and it is known as the freshwater shrimp of South Africa. Imagine our freshwater systems, which cover less than 1% of our planet's surface. I'd like you to realize that it supports over 10% of all known species and nearly half of all fish species we know and love. In Southern Africa, a region already water stressed, healthy rivers and wetlands are truly everything. They provide drinking water, they offer irrigation to vital crops in agriculture, they sustain and grow demand for wildlife tourism, as well as support local livelihoods. And right at the heart of these systems are our tiny giants, the freshwater shrimp, often invisible, but absolutely indispensable. So who are they, we may wonder? In our rivers, lakes, dams, and ponds, we find three main groups. Number one, the small, transparent, and sometimes colorful Caridina species. Little algae scraping machines found from the Eastern Cape to the Zambezi. Number two, the large river prawn, otherwise known as Macrobrachium, some reaching 20 to 30 centimeters in length, common in the warmer northern rivers of Zambia, Zimbabwe, and northern South Africa. And finally, and possibly most importantly, a very special one, the Palomon capensis, otherwise known as the Cape River shrimp, the only shrimp in the world that lives in naturally black acidic water streams of the Western and Southern Cape, making it one of the only detritivores of its caliber that not only survive but thrive in these otherwise difficult ecosystems. Engineers of the near impossible. Now let's talk about what they do, their roles, and why I think we should care. Their first role, they are considered nature's cleaning crew. Freshwater shrimp are detritivores and grazers. They eat dead leaves, bacteria, and algae that would otherwise rot and suck oxygen out of our water bodies. In the Umgeni and Umzimkhulu rivers in KwaZulu-Natal, studies show that where Caridina are abundant, water stays clear and oxygen levels remain high. Remove these shrimp from these ecosystems, and the entire system tips towards stagnation and algal blooms, ultimately depriving and robbing our ecosystems of oxygen. Their second role, we can think of them as protein packets in the food web. Shrimp are the biltong of the river. Tilapia, barbel, yellowfish, tigerfish, otters, herons, and the much mentioned kingfishers. Almost every predator you can think of eats them. In the Okavango Delta, shrimp biomass can reach 20 to 30 grams per square meter. Now that's a huge amount of high quality protein flowing up the food chain, ultimately supporting the ecosystems through properly processing detritus into the water columns, making and becoming food to other organisms, keeping our natural systems intact, and serving the tourism industry our economies need. Without these natural systems intact, the country will not draw the same interest and curiosity from the world, which could lead to the decline of tourism and ultimately a decline of our economy. Third and final mentioned role, they are living water quality meters or indicators. Freshwater shrimp are extremely sensitive to pollution. Heavy metals from mining, agricultural malpractice leaching pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and all those sides you don't want to be on the side of, into their water systems. Even the slightest pH changes will have them showing signs of decline. They show stress much longer and quicker than fish do. In South Africa, scientists now use Caridina, growth rates, and survival rates as official bioindicators for the national river health programs. When the shrimp disappear, we know we have a problem. And not only that, we know it very quickly. However, these tiny giants are in dire danger. Acid mine drainage in Mpumalanga and Gauteng is wiping out populations. Agricultural malpractice throughout Southern Africa's farmlands are leaching chemicals into their habitats, having detrimental impacts on their survival. Climate change is bringing hotter water and longer dry spells. Caridina, for example, starts dying out at around 30 degrees Celsius. And not to mention invasive alien shrimp introduced for aquaculture escaping into natural ecosystems. They are beginning to outcompete and even eat our native species in the Western Cape. So aside from all the doom and gloom, what is it that we can do as a people? Number one, we can protect the habitats we still have. As mentioned in the previous talks and so importantly highlighted, the riparian zones and wetlands are shrimp nurseries. Preserve their health and keep them clean first. Number two, clean up pollution at the source. Every ton of mine waste, every gram of plastic kept out of the rivers and natural waterways helps more than we can imagine nor fathom. Use less plastics and purchase package-free groceries to make a start. Farm responsibly. South Africa is growing its prawn and shrimp aquaculture scene, but we must prevent escapes of alien species, and we must have contingency plans in place ahead of embarking on these practices. And finally, be enthusiastic, get active and not anxious, keep monitoring and maintain a record, because when shrimp thrive, the whole ecosystem thrives. To conclude, freshwater shrimp may be small and seemingly insignificant, but they punch way above their weight. They clean water, feed wildlife, and warn us when things are going wrong. In a water-scarce region like Southern Africa, they are not just another invertebrate. They are keystones of true resilience. So the next time you're standing next to a clear, flowing river system in the Drakensberg, the Okavango, or anywhere along the Cape Folds, please remember this. There's an army of tiny shrimp working 24/7 to keep it that way. If you look close enough, you may just find them doing their merry old dance just beneath the water's edge. Thank you once again, everybody. My name's Ashraf Sirkhoth. Thank you for your time.
Ashraf, I loved every minute of that. I'm definitely on the side of the shrimp. I don't want to be on the side of any of those other sides. And my little shrimp pack of 5 who clean. I almost ran to the kitchen to get my aquarium I use various containers, and I stand often and look at the shrimp working their way through everything, cleaning it, gardening it. They are the gardeners of the underworld freshwater system. Definitely. They nurture their environment unbelievably. And you were inspirational and you told their stories so well. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much for having me, Cherise. Thank you,
It was
everyone.
lovely. All right, now strangely, we're going to go over to McLean because she is going to play the pre-recorded presentation of Jeanne Tarrant, who is known as the Frog Lady. And she has worked in amphibian conservation and research for 18 years. Her passion for amphibians was ignited when she enrolled at Northwest University in 2006, and she completed a master's degree and a PhD all through the African Amphibian Conservation Research Group. Then she conceptualized the Endangered Wildlife Trust's Threatened Amphibian Program and ran a successful project, and still is, across South Africa, focused on the country's threatened frog species for 12 years. In 2024, she embarked on a new amphibian-focused venture in the form of Anura Africa. And in her role as chair on the Southern African Regional Working Group for the IUCN's Amphibian Specialist Group, Jeanne is well placed to support the objectives of advancing amphibian conservation by identifying the needs and the knowledge gaps in South Africa and across the continent. She is very much involved with citizen science and partnerships with academic institutions, and she's been implementing conservation actions informed by evidence. So Jeanne is also the recipient of the prestigious Whitley Award or the Green Oscar for her work in conservation, and a career highlight with Sir David Attenborough narrating this short video. So Jeanne is an absolute rock star, as well as all my presenters are, and I would like to invite you to enjoy her presentation. You are still welcome to post questions in the chat. When Jeanne watches the webinar, we will get her to respond. Thank you, McLean. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeanne Tarrant with Anura Africa, and I'm sorry I can't be with you in person tonight at the webinar. I'm out in field looking for some of our summer rainfall frogs, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about this evening. So just for context, frogs around the world, frogs are of course amphibians, of which there are almost 9,000 species known today. There are 3 orders of amphibian, the frogs and toads, which are what we have in South Africa. There's almost 8,000 species of these, the tailless amphibians, the Anura, and then there's the tailed amphibians, the salamanders in the northern hemisphere, and then a smaller or lesser known group of around 230 species, the caecilians, which look like earthworms and behave like earthworms, living mostly underground, but they do have a backbone. South Africa is home to currently 135 described species of frog. And in terms of summer rainfall areas, KwaZulu-Natal has the highest species richness, highest number of frogs at 71 species. So where do we find frogs? Globally, they are distributed everywhere except for where it is too cold. So the polar regions of Antarctica and Greenland, and also some of the isolated islands like Galapagos, where frogs have not been able to colonize because they cannot raft across oceans. They are intolerant of salty water. Obviously, they can't fly like birds. So the highest concentrations are in the neotropic areas where it's warm and moist and forested. But yeah, in South Africa, as mentioned, we have 135 species, which is not bad for a largely arid country. All frogs need fresh water for survival and for their life processes, breeding, respiration, and survival. And thermoregulation in frogs is a very important factor to manage water. So they actually use their skins primarily to breathe, even though they do have rudimentary lungs. The skin is very important, and this is why frogs have to be in moist environments. And so thermoregulation is very important to them in hot temperatures, and they'll exhibit behaviors like this foam nest frog with a waxy covering and tucking in its legs, the reed frog also tucking in its legs to conserve water, and the bullfrog, when it goes into hibernation, produces this keratin cover around its skin to prevent it from drying out. When we look at species by province, again, just reiterating, we can see that KwaZulu-Natal has the highest number of species across all the provinces, whereas in the Western Cape, when we look at endemicity, the Western Cape has the highest number of frogs, and this is obviously a reflection of the floral diversity in the fynbos biome. So when we look at species richness, again, very much correlating with rainfall and increasing towards the east of the country. And we can see this directly through a number of species across from west to east, lowest numbers up in the north of the Northern Cape, and then coming across into the Western Cape and Eastern Cape again, KZN having the highest number of species associated with high rainfall and a diversity of habitats. We can also look at the correlation between species activity, which we look at calling activity, which is very much tied to seasonality. So in winter rainfall areas, that activity kicks off in around April, May, continues through the winter months, and then drops off again in September, October, which is just in time for our KZN frog season to start up. So those early spring rains, we start hearing our toads typically, and this activity increases through the summer months, tapering off again in around about March. When we look at amphibian numbers by habitat type, you may recall South America having those high concentrations of amphibians, Brazil and the rainforest. So it's no surprise that forest is the habitat where most species occur, followed by wetlands and grasslands, and even in deserts. When we look at rivers and streams, aquatic habitats, there's actually relatively low numbers of species. And this is because frogs need vegetation and emergent vegetation to shelter in, lay their eggs in, forage, and so forth. And so there's not actually that many species that are adapted to flowing open water systems. Just to give you an idea of a chorus from Zululand to indicate this diversity. diversity reflected in calling behavior, and there we've probably got 6, 7 species calling at the same site in Zululand, which is the highest diversity of the 71 KZN species. 51 of those occur in the Zululand area. And I'm just going to run through a couple of examples of species from KwaZulu-Natal and talk about their behavior associated with summer rainfall. So this is the Natal tree frog. It lives up in the trees, but actually comes down to the ground to breed and lay its eggs. And so it needs to do this, lay its eggs in muddy, moist areas so that the tadpoles can then wriggle through to the water body. The painted reed frog, very commonly encountered species in wetlands and open water bodies along the east coast down into the Eastern Cape, and now actually invading into the Western Cape, but very strongly correlated generally with our summer rainfall areas. The endangered Pickersgill's reed frog is very much a KZN coastal species, restricted to within 15 kilometers of the east coast, and very highly tied to high humidity, relatively warm winters, and again that summer rainfall. So very much a habitat specialist, which has restricted it to reed beds on the east coast, which has resulted in it being endangered. The gut-foot toad, fairly common also in the eastern parts of the country, and heralding those spring rains. And of course, this time of year, I get a lot of complaints about the noise this species makes. Here we can see a lovely male blowing up his yellow vocal sac, but really all they're trying to do is survive, and how wonderful to have this local wildlife in our gardens and our ponds. And sometimes our pools. But yeah, these are more terrestrial species, but again, entirely reliant on water and summer rainfall to be able to breed. The rain frogs, of which we have several species in KwaZulu-Natal, as their name implies, highly dependent on rain, and they will come out of their burrow systems. They live underground, and they will then call from openings when it's raining, and breeding takes place back underground, and tadpoles complete their development underground, never needing open water bodies, but entirely reliant on summer rainfall. Similarly, the spotted shovelnose frog, also a burrowing species, also only active in relatively heavy rain, and will come out and call in grassland areas during rain. Again, a species that occurs along the eastern parts of the country. The flare frog, or red-legged cassina, had its name changed several times in recent years, also associated with open water bodies and wetlands on the north coast into Zululand. And then just to focus in a little bit on the threatened kloof frog, it's now been listed as near threatened. It is one of the few species that is associated with streams. It's very much a habitat specialist that occurs only in streams in scarp forest in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, and it needs these streams in vegetated forested areas in order to lay its distinct egg clumps, which then require quite a high level of shade to develop. They take about 10 days to drop down into the water. The species is, as I mentioned, near threatened. It has suffered historical habitat loss, water abstraction, pollution going into streams, tree harvesting, including for traditional medicine, where in some cases the entire tree is damaged, trampling of stream vegetation by livestock, and especially in our urban areas, deteriorating water quality because of stormwater drains overflowing, and an increasing threat that I'm noticing is siltation in our, not only our streams, but our waterways and wetlands, and this is caused by development, and is a real problem to species like the kloof frog and species like the cascade frog. There has been a lot of research and conservation action for the kloof frog, including a long-term monitoring project, which has benefited from citizen science contributions. There's been a camera trap study, the first of its kind in Southern Africa. This work has resulted in 3 master studies and 3 publications recently. And however, there are ongoing conservation needs, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, where we improve the management, especially of these streams, and addressing water quality issues, and protecting sites formally where they don't occur in existing protected areas. There's a nice project currently in the kloof area to declare an entire escarpment where the species occurs. So yeah, just to end off on a punt of these provincial posters that NeuroAfrica developed in partnership with Northwest University and BioNerds. They are downloadable on the NeuroAfrica website. We have them for each province, so really just a nice educational resource to learn more about the frogs in your local area. They come in the top 3 languages of each province and are very interactive and include size reference, habitat reference, and the QR code of the call of each species. So please do download. And thank you for listening to my recorded talk. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on this email address. Thank you very much.
Well, fabulous presentation. I realize this webinar has run seriously over time. Sorry, I think I got very enthusiastic about water and coolness and the life that exists within our river systems, and my absolute belief that we all need to do more to protect them. And so I got you a whole lot of speakers that would inspire you to do so. Thank you for sticking with me. Jeanne, that was absolutely fabulous. I heard a couple of frog calls there that I didn't even recognize, and excuse the noise of my puppy in the background. I think on that note, I'm going to wish you all a wonderful evening, a wonderful 2025 end to our webinar series. I wish you peace and calm and coolness in your Christmas period, and we'll see you all next year. On behalf of the Botanical Society, myself, Madeleine in the background, and Martina, thank you to all our presenters. Thank you particularly to this year's presenters, this and my webinar's presenters this evening. You were wonderful, and it's been a fabulous way to end. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating, including our viewers, and we'll see you next year.
Thanks, Cherise.
Michael, Ashraf, Jessleena, Jeanne, and Phil, that was wonderful. Thank you very much to all of you.
Yeah. Bye now.
Thank you, Cherise. That was lovely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Well done,
thank you,
everyone.
everyone. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the inspiration. I just left a message. I'd love to get involved with any volunteer programs. Please give me a shout.
I'll send you all their contact details, Ashraf.
Amazing. Thank you again,
Thanks so
guys.
much, everyone.